In 1945, on the volcanic island of Iwo Jima, 380 U.S. Marines armed with flamethrowers faced a nightmare. Only 18 returned. Why did so many perish using one of World War II's most terrifying weapons? The answer lies in the brutal nature of both the weapon and the battlefield itself. Iwo Jima wasn't like other battles during World War II. Located halfway between Japan and the Marianas Islands, this small piece of volcanic rock became one of the most critical battlegrounds in the Pacific War. The U.S. military needed the island to provide a base for long-range bombers and fighter escorts. But the Japanese were not going to let go of it easily. The battle began on February 19, 1945. Marines landed with high hopes, but quickly discovered the island was much more dangerous than expected. The Japanese defenders were well prepared, and they had a secret weapon, an extensive underground tunnel system that allowed them to move undetected and strike at will. To root the enemy out of those tunnels, Marines turned to a weapon feared by both sides, the flamethrower. Flamethrowers were one of the U.S. Marines' most feared and effective weapons. The M2 flamethrower was made up of two large tanks filled with thickened gasoline and a smaller tank of compressed nitrogen. The weapon could send out a stream of fire up to 20 yards, burning everything in its path. However, this deadly weapon came with extreme risks. Flamethrowers were particularly feared because of their ability to cause devastating destruction in such a short amount of time. However, the weapon wasn't as effective against hardened defenses like bunkers, which were often built into the volcanic rock of Iwo Jima. The soldiers inside these bunkers could resist the fire for a time, but it would eventually suffocate them as the air was consumed by flames. The intense heat could also cause explosions of ammunition or fuel supplies within the structures, leading to further carnage. The high risk and immediate danger associated with the flamethrower made it a terrifying job on the front lines. The flamethrower was both a powerful tool and a dangerous liability for its operator. With a limited fuel supply, often no more than 7 seconds of fire per tank, the operator had to get dangerously close to the enemy positions to use the weapon effectively. And that's when the nightmare began. The biggest problem for the Marines was the pillboxes, hardened concrete fortifications scattered across the island. These pillboxes had small firing slits, machine guns, and overlapping fields of fire that made them incredibly difficult to destroy. Regular explosives didn't always do the trick, and Marines were forced to crawl or rush under fire just to get close enough to throw grenades or set off satchel charges. But the flamethrower had one advantage. It could clear pillboxes with fire. This meant flamethrower operators were given a critical task, but at a heavy price. The second a Marine with a flamethrower came into view, the Japanese defenders knew exactly what would happen next. The Marines carrying flamethrowers had a target painted on their backs. The flamethrower operator was one of the most vulnerable soldiers on the battlefield. Armed with heavy gear that weighed about 70 pounds, the flamethrower operator had to get up close and personal with the enemy. The only defense they had was their fellow Marines suppressing enemy fire with rifles and machine guns. But that wasn't always enough. Japanese troops were relentless. As soon as a flamethrower operator made his move, they'd turn their weapons on him, knowing that he posed a deadly threat. But it wasn't just the Japanese soldiers they had to fear. The flamethrower itself could turn against its operator. A sudden gust of wind or a malfunction could mean the flames turned back on them, often with deadly consequences. What made life for flamethrower operators even more terrifying was the fear of being captured. Unlike regular soldiers, who would likely face a quick death if captured, flamethrower operators were often tortured in ways unimaginable. The Japanese knew what these men did with their weapons, and being taken prisoner could mean a horrific fate. There are reports from Iwo Jima where a flamethrower operator misfired while approaching a cave. 2 Japanese soldiers rushed out, grabbed him, and dragged him into the cave. His comrades could hear him screaming from inside the cave for 2 days before they could do anything. Once the flamethrower operator finally reached the enemy's position, the effects were devastating. The intense heat, often reaching temperatures of 2,000 degrees, would instantly consume the enemy. Even if the Japanese soldiers weren't directly hit by the flames, the air would be drained of oxygen, and survival would be nearly impossible. It was a nightmare for everyone involved. This is the harsh reality that the flamethrower operator had to live with. They didn't just carry a weapon. They carried a psychological burden, knowing that every time they used it, they were causing horrific death and suffering to the enemy. The psychological toll was immense, and many survivors struggled with the haunting memories of their actions. As the battle wore on, the Marines introduced flame tanks, modified Sherman tanks equipped with flamethrowers. These tanks could fire flames up to 100 yards, 3 times the range of the M2 flamethrower. But even with this additional support, the dangers for the operators didn't diminish. The tanks, like the flamethrowers, became prime targets for the Japanese defenders. The operators had to use their tanks as mobile fortresses, moving slowly and carefully to avoid detection.
While the flame tanks were more effective than the handheld flamethrowers, they didn't completely shield the crews from danger. The tanks carried hundreds of gallons of fuel, making them highly vulnerable to enemy fire. A hit could turn the entire tank into an inferno, killing everyone inside. Despite the heavy casualties, the US Marines eventually captured Iwo Jima, but the victory came at a massive cost. Of the 380 flamethrower operators who landed on Iwo Jima, only 18 survived. The death rate was a shocking 94%, proof of the horrific nature of the battle and the dangers of the flamethrower. The island became a symbol of sacrifice and horror, a place where some of the most brutal combat took place during World War II. The loss of life on Iwo Jima wasn't just limited to the flamethrower operators. It was a pattern that plagued every aspect of the battle. The Marines fought an enemy that was dug in deep, using every available resource to survive and fight back. But even with these disadvantages, the flamethrowers played a crucial role in clearing positions and forcing the Japanese to surrender or die. The extreme danger of being a flamethrower operator wasn't just physical. It took a severe toll on the mental health of the men who carried these weapons. Unlike regular infantry, flamethrower operators often had to get up close and personal with the enemy, sometimes within just a few yards. This meant that more often than not, they saw the full extent of the destruction their weapon caused. The flames didn't just kill. They burned, disfigured, and caused unimaginable suffering. The constant exposure to such horrors led to what we now recognize as post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. Though back then, there was no official term for it. Many of these men struggled with feelings of guilt, knowing that they had caused such pain and suffering. After the battle, the memories of their actions haunted them, as they could still see the faces of those they had burned or killed. While many soldiers experienced trauma during World War II, flamethrower operators faced a unique kind of emotional strain due to the nature of their weapon. There are documented cases of flamethrower operators who couldn't shake the memories of the screams they heard as their weapon wreaked havoc on enemy soldiers. The psychological scars lasted long after the war, affecting their personal lives, relationships, and ability to cope with the future. Some veterans have reported that the images of the destruction caused by their flamethrowers would replay in their minds for years, making it difficult to function in everyday life. The terrifying nature of their role was one of the reasons so few survived. Not only did they face immediate threats from the enemy, but the mental strain was an unspoken burden that added to the war's brutality. These men didn't just fight for survival. They fought with the weight of their weapon's terrible power weighing on their conscience. Iwo Jima stands as one of the most infamous and iconic battles of World War II. While it was a victory for the US, it came at a heavy price. Out of nearly 7,000 American casualties, over 2,000 were Marines who died on the beaches of Iwo Jima. The flames of war didn't just scorch the earth, they scorched the lives of the men who fought there. The flamethrower operators in particular paid the heaviest toll. Their stories are often overshadowed by other aspects of the battle, but they are a crucial part of the island's grim legacy. The island of Iwo Jima would eventually become a symbol of sacrifice, but it would also represent the dark reality of war. The flamethrowers that were once seen as a powerful and necessary tool for clearing the island became synonymous with the terror, pain, and loss that marked the battle. While the island was ultimately captured, the cost was steep, more than just the loss of soldiers, but the emotional and psychological toll the battle had on everyone involved.
In the years following the battle, many veterans returned home, only to find that they could not escape the horrors they had witnessed. Some would go on to live productive lives, while others would battle their demons for the rest of their days.